But this episode, we're going to talk about Ethiopian Christmas. Why is it on January 7th? And remember that all of the Orthodox churches celebrate Christmas on January 7th. I started to do a little research to find out what is the history. And when you dive deep, what you find out and what you recognize is that nobody knows the actual historical date of Yeshua's birth. Let's just put that out there. Most of these conversations didn't happen until hundreds of years after he disappeared from creation. So nobody has a definitive date. A lot of people think because of indications that it would have been in the spring. There was a census. The flocks were in the field at pasture. These things typically don't happen in the winter. So a lot of biblical historians put it in the spring. It was actually celebrated in May by the early Egyptian church. And this is another key thing when you research the history of the church. Remember, the church in Alexandria in Egypt was the center of Christianity before Rome. Before Rome adopted the Christian faith, Saint Mark, who wrote the Gospel of Mark, traveled down into Egypt, into Africa, and this is what was basically the head church before it was usurped by the Roman influence. They celebrated in May. There was a council that came together. We talked about that in the Christmas episode, and December 25th was decided. December 25th and the Orthodox date actually coincided for some time. But this is one of the things that lets us know how power is distributed in the earth, because you had a pope named Pope Gregory. And Pope Gregory was an astronomer and studied the stars and decided he wanted to change time, and through his edict and through the power of the Catholic Church, which we as Rastafari know is one of the more powerful institutions on the planet, shadow government. We talk about that in another episode. They were able to change how time was recorded. So the Julian calendar, and for those who are not familiar, the Julian calendar was popularized or implemented by Julius Caesar, again another Roman. So all of these time measurements and the Ethiopian are on the Julian calendar. So this is why Ethiopia is 7 years behind. They stayed with that older calendar. But remember, these calendars also, we have to also recognize, are based on calendars that were taken from Kemet, from Egypt. So everything always gonna go forward to Mama Africa. However, it's important that we know that the celebration, I say all of that to say that the importance of the celebration of this day, the Christmas holiday, is really about celebrating the birth of Christ, and not to get too technical as to the historical date. Once you start getting to that, and when I read His Majesty word song, I realize that's the perspective His Majesty is also coming from. The universality, uniting forward Christendom. These were part of the mission as a defender of the Christian faith. The scope, even though we hail Him as the Almighty, He was the Almighty for all, or He was King of Kings for all humanity. So the mission was vast. And what the epiphany that I had in terms of the Christ consciousness and the mission, in terms of His Majesty saying that, based on the sacrifice of Yeshua, the hearts of man became the temple of the Most High, and manifesting that God with Himself. When we talk about Emmanuel, which was Yeshua's name given. Emmanuel means the Almighty is with us. So that, knowledge, and even when we used to listen early Sizzla Kalonji, and he would say Emmanuel, I used to equate it to Yeshua, not really early in my child, not really knowing the fullness about Prince Emmanuel until I learned more about the Bobo Shanti trad, and about, from the elders who actually traded with Prince Emmanuel. I was able to get the history of why the Bobo Shanti revere Emmanuel in that manner, and big up all of the Bobo Shanti family. But this Emmanuel concept, this Christ concept, and Prince Emmanuel speaks about it, he says, man of right is God in flesh. This is a central concept that we have to reinstitute into Rastafari. Again,